Hello, everyone. Um, I am Felipe Montoya. This is the talk about Xblocks. Thanks for joining me. I'm a little nervous, but that one is up. So, a little bit about me. I'm in the community since 5 years ago, long time. I'm one of the earliest open source contributors, along with Xavier from OpenCraft. I'm current CTO of edX, the service provider, and I also work at the EPFL for the maintenance of their platform. So a little bit about the projects I'm involved in. First and largest software as a service provider of OpenEDX. If you feel like taking OpenEDX for a test drive, just go to our website and we'll set you up in a few minutes. We also maintain an XBlock in the community called XBlock Flow Control, used for adapting the learning paths. And we have some extensions in terms of making the emails of the platform look beautiful and be HTML instead of plain text, and real-time analytics. We have a large technical knowledge of the microsite solution for multi-tenants of edX platform. And now we're currently working a lot on insights. So those are all topics I'm very interested in. If you come and join me anytime or just at the halls, I'll be happy to talk about those. So about this talk, there's always someone doing the Xblocks talk. There was a great tutorial on how to install them and how to get started yesterday, or the day before, I think. So I'm doing the Xblocks this time, and that means this is the talk where we try to set newcomers into the extension point that Xblock is, and I'll try to solve these sort of questions, like what kind of things you can do in an Xblock, what kind of user data you can access, how to, like there's a lot of buzzwords, Django apps, Xblocks, compatibility, does it work with Ficus? That's sort of the things that I'm trying to go in this talk. And especially for me, it's very important, and I will try to make an emphasis on this, is how not to make it that complex that not even yourself can work on it later on. So at the highest level, from the bird's perspective, Xblocks for newcomers are the component architecture for courseware. That means that's the sort of thing that you can use to extend the course experience of a user. You can extend the platform in many, many ways, but this one is specific for courseware, is the one designed for that. So they create a hierarchy of pieces, of blocks, and people. There was this moment in time a long time ago where we said everything's an Xblock, and you can put Xblocks inside of Xblocks and then make like Xblocks children and lists, and yeah, we're in that tree, but 5/9 of confidence, you're always working at the latest Xblock, like the one on the leaves of the tree. You're never working with the upper stages of the hierarchy. And it is the primary, one of the primaries, but I think the primary extension point for course content. So if you're planning to do new, creative, interactive things, Xblock is your go-to framework for that. So they are particularly nice because they play along with the studio. So once you create them, if you're a developer and you're sitting here and you're thinking, I want to do an Xblock, think of the course author that doesn't want to deal with code. They just want to get an experience done. And Xblocks is good for this because they play along with the studio, but they also play along with OLX. So if you have like advanced editors or you're doing your own ELX, making a target and just uploading it, they both play along with this. They are external. They are very good at being wrappers of external services. Not most of, but a lot of the community-driven Xblocks are things for connecting Google Drive, things for connecting Microsoft, things for connecting these sort of things. They have also a very stable interface. Yesterday night, and I don't think that's changed, the pre-alpha label is still on the API of the Xblocks. So we'll talk on that later on. And they also allow you to live in an independent repository, so you can have tags, you can have version history, you can make an Xblock that works on Ficus, but if you wrote something differently or you want to extend it, but you need some Ginkgo functionality, just make a new commit, new tag, and then you're good to go. So this is very important. It's not on the slides, but there are also some things Xblocks are not nice for. There are some challenges. Discovery of Xblocks. Like it's been 4 years of the Xblocks adoption, and there are a lot of Xblocks there, but no one is like cross-sharing them. Why are we not like using Xblocks from the community more? Some things, especially among service providers, we tend to be very close and look at what everyone's doing, but this could go like an order of magnitude higher, and it's not being done, so that's a challenge. And also there are some API limitations. So that's also a challenge. You cannot do everything you want to do with an Xblock. And that's sort of what I'm trying to cover here. What happens then? Some basic tools for working with Xblocks are the SDK naturally, but also a cookie cutter. If you're getting started, Eugene gave a wonderful presentation of how to start with this. He's back at the back of the room, but he was talking yesterday for like 45 minutes just how to use this and how to get started. Everything that's related to that, I will just point you in that direction. Go and watch the video of his talk. Try to follow the repository they have on GitHub. Okay, so from the community, what's out there? Those are just names. We try to keep an eye on good Xblocks or maintained Xblocks, things that are working that you can pull into your installation, and they are stable and they work. So if your Xblock is not here, come talk to me or go talk to someone at edX and try to publish it a little bit more, because we are missing out on the great work that the community is doing. And this is just one list, but there are 2 more lists. There is the Confluence Xblocks directory. That would be my go-to resource now. It's a manually compiled list. It gets outdated, but it's the best we have. And there's xblocks.org. You can publish your work there, but it's not maintained. It's a little outdated. It looks nicer, but it doesn't have the information. Just to be sure of what we're talking, what's an Xblock and what is not an Xblock. So Django apps are not Xblocks. So a lot of the features of the platform are inside of Django apps, and you sort of turn them on and off, and that's not Xblocks. Auxiliary services, nodes, or discussions, that sort of thing is also not an Xblock. There's some work to bring discussions to play along Xblocks nicely, but that's in the works. And some features like course pages in the studio. There are other extension points that are not Xblocks, just to be sure. Okay, that was the bird eye level overview. So inside there, first of all, if you are getting started, go to this repository. OpenCraft made it for the presentation. I don't know if it was just for the presentation, but they have a good guide of how to get started there. But the general guideline is you download the SDK. You please use the cookie cutter. Don't get started just by throwing files in, because there are many, and there are some best practices that the cookie cutter will solve. And then you start having fun developing like great interactions and front-end things, and you can go wild there. And then you start, that sort of takes you to required services and use the XBlock API, because that's not a standalone thing. You want your content, you want your XBlock to actually interact with user data. You want it to be persistent. You want the user to feel like it's just one of the experience of the whole course. It's not just okay, I went to a web page and I played along with some game. You want that game to be part of your course. You want to reference later on, like, how you did on that, or have like different chapters in the course. I don't know, just incredible stuff that you can make with Xblocks. So that's sort of where that will take you. Use the XBlock API to access the internal data of the platform, and that will take you to the services. So then it's open season. Go for hunting. And how far can you go? I would say sky's the limit, but not really, because there are some limitations. There is some data you can access. There is some data that's forbidden. There is some, it's Python code and it's front-end code, which with any framework that you want, but you still want to access the specifics of the edX platform. Otherwise, you wouldn't have an OpenEdX course. You would have just a blog page, and you would go crazy in this. So there are some limits, and they mostly arise on the use of the XBlock API and on the data you can access. So I compiled this list, which I don't think anyone at the back of the room can see. The presentation is online for later on, but I will sort of go through a list in a quick way. You have file system data, so you can store files uploaded from the user. This is persistent, and if configured properly, it goes into S3 or whatever your Swift container for OpenStack is, and it's stored nicely and securely. You have field data. You can add variables to your XBlock and keep them at different scopes. So you can have like user data or group data or course data or platform-specific data, and this is all variables that you can create and you can access. You have translation and internationalization services. You have, naturally, the user settings, and the user object is available for you. Then you have platform settings, and then you have like the OpenEdX things, which are cohorts, cohort systems, bookmarks, proctoring, certificates, badging, user tags. All that sort of things are available to you in the way of services. The services that an XBlock provide are dependent on the runtime, but for now, let's be honest, there is just one runtime that everyone cares about, and that is the OpenEdX LMS. Studio is just for authors. Workbench is mostly for developers, but everyone ends up using the platform at the end. So this is what we have to work for. And there is a question here, or a thing I would like to ask the community, or maybe as a community member, I would like edX to help us get this into a platform, and this is extension for those services. Right now, they're baked into a platform, and there is not much you can do. You can fork, and then you can add anything you want. But since we're all developing this together, let's get together and find a way to make this more extensible. It's not technically difficult, but we need to get a lot of people on board to make sure it goes in a way that works for everyone. So that's where it's at. This is a lot already. You can do crazy things with this technology. It's a little stable. It's a little too stable for me, maybe, but it's already quite a lot. But then what happens when you try to go further? What happens when you want to access data that I didn't put on that list? Specifically, course grades. That's the first thing you always want to access, because you want a game that also takes into account what the students did in other parts of the course, or what happens when you want to access more things. In any case, you have basically two options. So you either break the rules and you start importing things from the platform. Technically, it's running on the same Python environment. So you have everything that's available to the platform is available to you as a developer. So you can do that. And you also can go the Django way. You can make the platform an hybrid XBlock application. You can then access the things that you are used to as a Django developer, but within the XBlock. So how does that look like? If you're trying to to import the core modules, just import them. It's free. And if you're trying to make it an XBlock app, you don't have to fork the platform. If you're working on a development, you can just write it in common PI, put the name of your XBlock in the optional apps tuple, and you're set. But there's also a way to get this done without forking, without touching the core code at your Ansible level, modifying the JSON lms.m.json file. When you have done, when you're in this path, then you get access to all the core modules. So grading, so certificates, so proctoring, so anything that wasn't available to you is now game. Then you get management commands. You can run them in a cron tab in your server and have like XBlock specific code being fired by your server. Or you can have models. You want to store things on the database. Also, because you have access to the core modules, you could import from all the models of the platform. So you could go look at the, I don't know, Courseware student module history if you wanted. And then you get translations the Django way. So no more importing the service, and then for any developer that's done this, self.get service i18n, and then use that long sentence or make a helper for that in your code. Just import uget text and go for it. So that's the sort of thing you get. But then, and this is happening. I didn't come up with this. It's on the platform. Open Assessment does it, edX, SGA does it, Problem Builder does it. They all want to go further, and they do this. Or it's not like it's a prohibited thing. That's why I put it in the slides. But it's a way to go further than what you could just using Xblocks. But then the cost you have to pay is that there is a lot more surface area to crash things. So now you have access to all the platform, but also if the platform changes, your Xblock stops working. So that's where you start needing tagging, and then you need to review your work on every, let's say, named release, at least. And then you have more surface area for security concerns. Like, now, can you install any XBlock anytime? There could be security concerns there. But you still get the nice things. It still plays well with with the Studio. It still goes with OLX. You have all the data to interact with. And then you have Django tools, which is awesome. So that's there. But then you need to keep things ordered in order not to lose your head, because it's easy to forgo just one minor best practice, and then you're stuck with something that you don't really want to be stuck with. So this, up to this part, everything is what's on the platform. We haven't touched anything that's not upstream. Here it's more like years of development of open Xblocks, and what have we learned from that? So what are our very opinionated ways of doing it? But I've talked to a lot of people in these last few days, and we're sort of agreeing that this is a way to go. So first is, whenever you're trying to access core functionality, make it a service. Don't just go and import code and start using it. Try to go in the similar way. Like once we make it extendable, once it's a configuration variable that you can add, and then you have this, you will thank yourself for having done this. But even before that, it's just way easier to maintain. So keep before you would have done xblocks.needs and then you import the service, let's make up a great service to access the user grades on different core sections. You would have done that if you had the opportunity, but if you don't have, then make a great service, import the same blocks the same classes that the platform would have imported, and use it as a service. Then use the JSON handler. It's a think of it as an API. It's a course-scoped API. It works with or without fragments. Doesn't matter. Initialize them. Don't initialize them. Create a different application and keep your code into different modules that you can later on work with. It will keep your head with a lot less things to worry about. You can have as many handlers, JSON handlers, as you want, so there is also no limit for this. And with these pieces in mind and projects to go through, we came up with this pattern. So on the front end, you take anything you want, like JavaScript, any framework. Why do we have to say anything about the frameworks you like? Just go get it. Then you have those frameworks talk to JSON handler. This JSON handler in turn uses regular services, but also custom services, whatever you need. And this in turn talks to a platform. So you have these 4 layers where you will try to catch breaking changes in the one that makes more sense for you. I made a gist, and the presentation is online, so you can go click it with more specifics, but I will try to go through them a little bit in detail. So on the XBlock, you have the JSON handler. I just created an API endpoint example, and then you use any self.method that you want, and then there you have all the Python power, anything that you need. But then just try to keep them in if you're accessing core modules of the platform, try to keep them in a service. That's all. That's the only thing I have to say for that. On Studio, you can use the fragments, so you can use the unit view, but you can also use pages, and I made a specific example for this. So just try to put the minimum thing that you need in order for your front-end application to be loaded on the page. It works on student view, it works on units, it works on outside of the units, info page, whatever. I'm also very excited about web fragments and this. Probably you can make this live inside a web fragment and then put them anywhere in the platform. We'll see about that. And then on JavaScript, I had a sample require module, but then you sort of load the configurations, and I don't know if I can scroll here, but what's on the require module there is just a bootstrap. Okay. Yeah, so after I require the module, I just start loading my anchor on the website, on the HTML page, and I go at it. So that's a very simple pattern. Try to keep things separated. There was some talk. We talked after the XBlock tutorial. We talked with the people at the end of the presentation. The people in the room. Some started talking about using React for this. It's like the new shiny technology we all want to get our hands on. So let's use that. Why not? And then on the front-end talk later on, there was a concept that was decouple data, logic, and appearance. It's right there. Appearance, data, and logic. So you can already use those sort of patterns here. Then we're talking about keeping your sanity. So test. Period. Use Docker and the SDK. Again, go to the tutorials how to get this done. But then use continuous integration tools. Travis CI is for free if you're publishing on GitHub. Even if you have private Xblocks that you don't want to publish because it was something very internal, still use Circle, use anything that you want, but keep testing. Otherwise, you will get to a point where there's nothing you can do. The test train has left the station. And if you're trying to keep custom services separated, or if you're doing custom services, then you might have problems that arise because you cannot access the platform module, specific modules during tests, but there are some technical ways around that. So there's no buts, just the technical solutions are there. So how does that look like? From our experience, we had the same client having two different Xblocks. They wanted to extend the course and make it like a competition. The specific quizzes were like activities that people had to go through in life and take pictures of them, and then they wanted people to really engage with the platform. So for the first year, we made a sort of like a Tour de France gamification thing, and we didn't have any idea of these patterns. And this is a nightmare to migrate. And every time I have to go look at that code, my head spins, and we still have to do it. We have to maintain this. Following the same patterns, we made a ranking. So we are technically accessing the same data. We just make like the final standings. And this is a breeze. It never breaks. It broke once, and solving it was like half an hour time. It took longer to get set up than actually fixing the problem. And you get very, very interactive experiences. So let me show you like live. So that's a course page. What you saw while it was loading the page was the application connecting to the custom JSON handler service. And then there you have it. This was just a final standing, but still, you're accessing custom data from the platform, and you're doing it in a way that doesn't break your head. And then right there, we had the previous solution. It works as well. It renders, and then it creates a map. So the users get the same sort of activity. They don't realize the technical challenges that went behind, but let me assure you, we will never do this sort of pattern again. Oh, Lord. So with that in mind, just a last few thoughts I have on Xblocks now is, and this changed a little bit during the last days, but if we're publishing Xblocks, then let's publish them, but let's also have like let's solve those problems that we have, like discoverability, statistics. How often does my Xblock get used? Should I put more effort into supporting older versions because there's people using it? We have no data on that. Also, how do we make Xblocks land on master and be like out of the box installed inside of the platform? That's an issue we haven't even started talking about yet. And also, this might be like a little bit related with the conference, but we've talked about product, we've talked about the business vision, we've talked about that, and just this morning we started talking about the extending the platform vision for the future of OpenEdX. So that discussion needs to happen at the same sort of level that happens for business or for learner's experience. So yeah, that's what I have. Let me finish up with that, but I'll take questions. I want questions. I want feedback on this. So thanks a lot.
So first off, it was a really wonderful presentation. Thank you for that. I learned a lot from your presentation. So my question was, next steps for the front-end part. I see you use require.js to include some libraries. Why not go further and use NPM or similar package manager to do that? I tried myself doing a prototype of trying to scope the whole bundled script with Webpack or similar, Browserify, something like that. and you just have to have a package JSON, include your npm packages, do npm install, and everything gets bundled into one production JavaScript. What do you think about that?
Definitely. I think that's the way to go. If you go, let's go back real quick to where I actually put this into a page. So what I'm doing here is just installing one script that has my Podium app required JS application. So that line, just change it for whatever best practices you have for front end, and then that's it. It doesn't tie you to anything else. So even if you're on the experimental side of things and you want to go like, oh, I just found out this framework, I want to test it, I want to see if it works for me, go for it. And then after you've done it, after you've done something amazing, let me know, please.
Hello. So most of the times when we develop a Xblock, we run into some error. And the only thing that we see in the studio is that the user cannot access the Xblock. But we don't know exactly where to look for this error in the logs, because on the application logs, we don't see it.
Well, I feel you on that. Yeah, debugging Xblocks, it's a pain. So there are different logs that you can access, and sometimes it's not clear which one it is. Normally, there is one that is breaking. If you're running this on development, it's fairly easy because you have the console and everything gets thrown in there. If you're a little bit higher up, you're running on production environments, I would recommend that you still, like, you have some tools for that. Use Sentry, use New Relic, something that lets you modify that. Because if you think you're not finding the logs for that, and you go a little bit bigger and you have multiple servers installed running this simultaneously, then it's not just which file, but on which server it happened for the first request, but then which happened for the second request if you don't have sticky sessions. So the nightmare just goes on and on and on. So better tooling, it's definitely the way to keep your sanity in that regard.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Just one comment and one question about the NPM thing. You really should remember that JavaScript dependencies can only be loaded from the public folder from the Xblock. So you cannot load them from just anywhere. So yeah, my question, I really like the fact that you made services more popular. They really deserve it. What would you think if Xblocks both declared their requirements on services and both provided services, like a provide decorator?
Yeah, I understand that. Well, there are two sides of that. And also, I have like a back comment on that, on the public folder. But for Xblocks producing and also consuming their services, you probably want your service to be reusable. So it might make sense, if you're using something like the grade service that you're going to use everywhere, probably it makes more sense to have it in a separate installable app, and then also pip require it into environment, and then extend from there, so that all your Xblocks that use the grade service again, or whichever services that you're creating, have the latest version. But let's say you do have a very specific service. It's better, like, if your mindset is that of, I'm doing this no matter the cost, because my university wants it, or because my customer asks for it and is paying for it. So you still need a way to go. The answer can't be, no, that's impossible, because then your only solution is fork the platform and do it. So I would be happy, although reusing the services is much better. If it's a self-publish and consume, it's better if you don't have to fork anyways. So that's sort of where I'm at. And on the loading the application from anywhere, you could still use the assets from the course. So if you wanted to have something like a little bit more course scoped, you could upload the JS file or the specific files to the application files, front-end application files, to the course assets, and probably work from there. That if you have different instances of the same XBlock running on different courses, that might not be such a good idea, but.
Just to comment on the errors in Studio, I seem to recall in Studio, in the platform, there's something that catches exceptions, a certain class of exceptions for Xblocks. So if you are running into that, there's actually a place in the platform code where you have to like comment out something that's catching the exceptions, and otherwise they don't get logged anywhere at all. So yeah, it's a catch-all as well as all exceptions.
Right. Follow-up question on that. Why don't we make a PR that removes that bit? I know why, but we are out of time. So thanks, everyone. And yeah, just come join me if you want to keep talking on this.